Welcome to Washington in Focus Daily. It is Friday, April 17th, 2026. I'm Carlene Johnson, the Center Square state government reporter. And in today's episode, there is a new report out from Mountain States Policy Center showing that Idaho's income tax rate, lowered last year to a flat rate and lowered in previous years from a high rate of 7.7 or 8%, way down to what it is now. Well, as it turns out, that lower income tax rate has translated into more income tax revenue coming into the state of Idaho. Why should we care? Well, because this is relevant given the fact Washington state has a brand new, yet to be implemented income tax. So we're going to wade into that pretty fascinating conversation with Mountain States Policy Center's president and CEO, Chris Cargill. So you'll want to hear what he has to say. And then curious discovery by a man in Renton. Now, a big old box of ballots, unopened ballots, never received by the person they were to be mailed to, never opened. Well, now the state GOP chair is weighing in. They have custody of those approximately 500 ballots, and they've been trying to figure out what happened. Why were these not delivered? Why were these not opened? Did the people that should have received the ballots end up getting to vote in those elections? And it's not just the most recent election. Some of these go back a few years. So this is quite interesting, and not just from King County, but some also from Snohomish County. I did get some response back today from the Office of King County Elections and also from our Secretary of State's office about this discovery. So very interesting, and an interview as well with state GOP chairman Jim Walsh about this discovery, because right now the GOP is in custody of these ballots. And then a generational family, ranch family from Grant County, specifically Cooley City, if you know where that's at in the state. They are fighting the Washington Department of Ecology. They are accused of violating wetlands protections with water usage on their cattle ranch. They've been fighting for years now. Meantime, fines have been mounting, and fines against the fines that are yet to be paid. They're fighting to have an opportunity for their case to be heard before a jury of their peers, rather than having a governor appointed administrative law judge, a single person, make a decision in something that really could be life altering for their generational farm family. So I had a conversation with their lead attorney, and I will share that with you. I haven't seen coverage of this anywhere else. So let's dive in. It turns out our neighbors in Idaho, and they've had a state income tax for quite some time, but cuts in recent years to the amount of that income tax has translated into a dramatic increase in income tax revenue for the state of Idaho. Of course, that is contrary to the mantra of tax hike champions, who argue if you cut tax rates, government's going to suffer, revenues will fall. That has not been the case in Idaho. And in a report from Mountain States Policy Center, results really don't fit that narrative. So this is Chris Cargill. He is the founder and CEO of Mountain States Policy Center, talking about what they have found regarding Idaho's income tax.
And this is something that those of us kind of in the free market movement have been talking about for years. We have evidence from the past of the federal government doing this, where the income tax would come down and then revenues would go up. And the reason for that is because the more that you lower the income tax, the more workers that you'll see come into the system, the better the economy does. And then as a result, more people start paying into income taxes. So it is essentially the easiest way to explain it to people is, look, would you rather have one person paying 10%, or would you rather have three people paying 6%? What is going to be more? Of course, the three people paying 6% is going to be more than the one person paying 10%. And so that's really the theory here that we tested. So we took a close look at what Idaho has done. And Idaho, since the mid 2010s, 2014, has been steadily lowering its income tax. So in 2014, it had an income tax rate of 7.4%, effectively. That was the top rate, although you hit that rate if you made really any money in this state. Um, it went to a flat rate of 5.3% starting last year. And so Idaho has essentially lowered its rate by 2.1%, a huge amount, just over the past 10 years. So, of course, at the time of all of these reductions, we were hearing a lot from people, oh, this is going to cause revenue to fall off a cliff and we can't afford tax cuts and we're going to be scrapping for pennies and all of the things that we've always heard about tax reductions. But if you go back and look at the revenue since then as well, revenue has almost doubled in Idaho, the income tax revenue. We're not talking about any other tax. We're just looking at the income tax. And when you look at the income tax, the rate has come down in Idaho 2.1%, but the amount that Idaho is bringing in has increased by about 95%.
So, again, a reminder, as he mentioned, going back to 2014, so 12 years ago, the state income tax in Idaho brought in about $1.16 billion in income tax revenue. That's not their other taxes. This is specifically income tied to the income tax. By 2025, that number had climbed to roughly 2.26 billion. That is a 95% increase, or nearly double, even though they went to a flat income tax rate last year and a lowered rate at that. So, as Cargill points out, if tax cuts truly starve government, Idaho should be really scrambling to make up that lost revenue, but it's quite the contrary. So he told me that, if you're going to have an income tax, which they're not a fan of, but he says if you're going to have an income tax, it should be like Idaho went to last year to be fair. So everybody's paying the same flat rate, no matter the level of your income. Right now, of course, the millionaire's tax that was just recently signed into law in Washington will be 9.9% on income in excess of $1 million or combined household income above the $1 million threshold. But opponents contend that that is eventually going to be a tax on the income of all income earners in Washington, no matter how much money you make. So he said, you know, Washington really should be looking at what has happened in Idaho since they're not new to the income tax. And he says it's not a fair comparison to simply say, which I heard over and over again during the legislative session by majority members pushing the income tax. They kept saying, "Oh, look at Idaho. They're doing great. They've got an income tax. They've been raking in the revenue for years." Um, they left out the part of the conversation where it's now a flat rate in Idaho where everybody pays the same rate, and it has been lowered dramatically over the past 11, 12 years.
Now, Idaho, when you're comparing it to Washington, Idaho doesn't have a state property tax. So it's a lot different than what Washingtonians have to deal with not only a huge sales tax, a huge gas tax, a huge property tax, and now a huge income tax in Washington state. You compare that to Idaho, which doesn't have any of those things. Um, there's no question that businesses and that folks who are perhaps more wealthy individuals would be much better off in Idaho than they would be in Washington. And I think that, Carlene, the interesting part about this is if you remember during the debate on the income tax in Washington, there were some legislators, including some of the more senior Democrats, who were saying, oh, well, Idaho has an income tax and they're doing just fine. And they were trying to make it seem as if Idaho was worse off than Washington. The numbers do not tell that story. Washington State is headed off of a fiscal cliff because of some of the policies that it has adopted.
So, some fascinating perspective on Idaho's income tax and lowering that rate, bringing in more income tax revenue for the state. Um, it is an interesting conversation that we probably should spend some more time here having in the state of Washington. I encourage you to check out the article at Mountain States Policy Center. Now to the mysterious discovery of a great big box of ballots. Didn't mean that to be so illustrative, but it was. Um, it was found this month in Renton. Guy finds a box, a great big box of ballots, approximately 500 of them, apparently sitting outside a dumpster. Now, there's a big mystery here to be answered because this is not just ballots from the most recent election. These ballots go back in time. So I'll let State GOP Chairman Jim Walsh sort of lay this out for you.
A fellow got in touch with me through social media and said, I have a box of ballots that I found on the ground next to a dumpster behind a strip mall in Renton. And this fellow said to me he had contacted first King County Elections, whose headquarters is also in Renton, by the way, uh, and gotten no response, no interest, no feedback. He told them, I found a box of ballots unopened, I think, he said, and would you like them? I can bring them to you. Do you want to come get them? No response. He then contacted the state secretary of state, Mr. Hobbs, his office anyway, said the same. I have a box of ballots. I'm not sure what they are. I'm not sure whether they've been processed or not processed. Would you like them? And he said to the Secretary of State's office, I contacted King County Elections. They're not interested. Do you want them? Again, no response from the State Secretary of State's office. Then he called his Congress representative, their office, and said, I've got this box of ballots. Do you guys care about this issue at all? Again, no response. No, well, that's not our job. Contact King County Elections, all this kind of this stuff going on. So he reached out to me and he said, do you guys care about this? And I said, we absolutely care about it. Let me see what these ballots are.
So Walsh told me they pulled those ballots out of the box, kind of tallied them up and divided them into categories. He said the bulk of them seem to be from the 2024 primary and general elections. So sent to the voter, apparently never received by the voter and never opened. None of these were filled out. None of these were processed by elections officials. So the question is, what the heck happened?
There were about 500 ballots. I have a few with me. This is one. There were about 500 ballots, and they're unopened ballots, non-processed and blank ballots, delivered to people, it looks like, primarily who had mailboxes at a private mailbox shop. One of these private, you can rent a mailbox, use the street address as your mailing address, but then have a mailbox. So not a U.S. Postal Service mailbox area, but one of these private mailbox companies. And but there are a bunch of them. There are like 500. And while most are from King County Elections, there were a couple from Snohomish County sent to a private mailbox in Renton. We organized these. They are from several years. The earliest, like 2022, but then through 2025. But the biggest single chunk of them are like this one, are from the 2024 general and primary elections.
So I did reach out to King County Elections about the box of ballots and received a response via email. We'll put this up so you can see what they said. Our office is looking into the claims. They confirmed that they have absolutely no record of someone reaching out about this. If this person had talked to our team, we would have told them to bring the box directly to our office so that we could look into it further. Never, they say, would our team say that we're not interested in any box of election related mail. So this response again from King County Elections communications manager Haley Watkins said, basically unless we have more information from the guy that found the box and he can show us what day he made a phone call and maybe left a message, or what day he submitted an email. They don't really have much to go on at this point, but she said they are looking into it. And I also reached out to the office of Washington Secretary of State Steve Hobbs. And right before recording this podcast today, I also received an email back from them basically saying the same thing. We don't have a record of someone reporting finding a box of ballots. And they are also going back through emails and phone records and trying to make sure that nothing was missed. Said that they're also working with King County Elections on this, and hoping to find out more. But Representative Walsh said for him, this is really about the integrity of our elections and the lack of any ballot tracking, what she calls like a chain of custody for a ballot, is a big concern. Now, you might recall that um, the Washington GOP has been pushing for the last year or so an attempt for a citizen initiative, a kind of a voter ID initiative that you'd have to prove you're a citizen before you're going to get that ballot. And they did not get enough signatures to get this qualified last time, but they're trying again with a citizen initiative, which is IP 26500. So gathering signatures for that right now. They've got until July 2nd. I think it's the deadline to gather more than 300,000 signatures. So I did not get a chance to ask Representative Walsh where they're at with that signature drive. But again, this was tried before and they were unable to gather enough signatures to get this qualified for the ballot this last time around. Now, keep in mind, you may have a very crowded ballot come November as far as initiatives go, because we have the two already qualified, but Let's Go Washington, the one to restore parental rights and the one to protect girls in sports. Let's Go Washington may also be soon launching an initiative effort to repeal the recently signed into law income tax. And then, of course, you've got Washington GOP working on the voter ID initiative. So it might be a very crowded initiative drive effort for the ballot, and you can expect a whole lot of advertising on both sides of this issue. Now, I want to tell you about a case out of Grant County and a family that lives near Cooley City, and their fight against the state over use of their land and their water rights. Now, this is Wade and Teresa King, and their family is ranched in Grant and Douglas counties for about 70 years. So, multi generational ranchers. They face significant penalties right now and compliance costs from the Washington State Department of Ecology. And now what they're seeking is for a jury of their peers to kind of look at the fight and say, is this fair that we've been given all of these, these massive penalties? So here is their attorney, Oliver Dunford, from the Pacific Legal Foundation, kind of laying out their story and their fight with the Department of Ecology.
The ranch has been in the family since the 1950s. And recently, the Department of Ecology has accused them of harming alleged wetlands in Washington. And supposedly there are some alkali wetlands in the area. And so the department decided that the areas near the King's property must also be alkali wetlands, and therefore they're guilty. Now, the department accuses the Kings of harming wetlands both on their own property and on government-owned property that the Kings lease for cattle grazing. The Kings believe that they are not subject to the law in question, that they have water rights that have been grandfathered in, and that the department has no authority here whatsoever. And they obviously object to the way that the department is going about enforcing the law on a constitutional basis.
Now, it was back in February of 2023 when the Department of Ecology began issuing administrative orders against them, claiming that they're what they believe is a permit exempt stock water pond that they need for their cattle farm. The State Department of Ecology says they didn't have any rights to get in there. They contend otherwise. And again, at this point, an administrative law judge appointed by the office of the governor is going to make a decision as to whether or not really these fines that amount to more than millions at this point um, could destroy this multi-generational ranching family. They want a jury of their peers, and by the US Constitution, they should receive that. So that's what the contention is behind this argument right now. And here again, their attorney with Pacific Legal Foundation.
The government has pointed out that there have been decades of statutes on the books in Washington, and I can add in federal agency or by Congress as well, that do channel these kinds of cases through administrative agencies. We think that is the problem. The government says that we have raised a novel argument that runs counter to decades of practice, and to which we say that's exactly the problem. That these agencies now have the authority to make these kinds of decisions that should be made in front of a judge and jury. The one halfway decent argument that the government has is that the restoration orders are or could be deemed to be equitable orders. And this goes back to when the country was founded, when Washington was founded, there were actually two different courts, or at least two different courts. There was a common law court and there were equity courts. And if you had a legal claim, you got to go in front of a common law judge and a jury. And if it was an equitable claim, you went to the equity courts. Generally, an equity order is when the court orders you to do something or not do something. So they're saying this is an equitable order. The restoration orders are requiring you to restore the property. But the order that imposes the fine is clearly a legal order. And so our contention is that at the very least, that claim should go to a jury, and a jury should decide all the facts. And one of the facts at issue is, as I mentioned earlier, whether the property sites at issue are wetlands in the first place, and whether what the Kings did actually harmed the property. So, but we also think that because these orders all go together, that they should all be in court. The second point that I think is important here is that agencies like the department often avoid constitutional challenges by delaying things and by imposing such ruinous costs that property owners like the Kings or other regulated parties are forced to settle at some point. And so this process is going to be enormously expensive for the Kings. In court, not in court, but we asked the Attorney General if they would agree to a expedited briefing schedule for on our constitutional claims, and they denied that request. So they know that if they just keep going, imposing these exorbitant costs on the Kings, they're hoping that the Kings will settle. Not only then will the department get its way, but it will also avoid the constitutional challenge. And so we are trying to get this resolved as quickly as possible, and if necessary, we'll appeal to the Washington Supreme Court and then and even the U.S. Supreme Court. But we need to move quickly. The hearing is scheduled to begin in September, and so we're hoping to get things resolved as quickly as possible.
Now, this case is set to proceed to a full merit hearing on May the 21st, so just a little more than a month from now. And if they lose this case, Dunford, their attorney, told me they will absolutely appeal to the state Supreme Court. And beyond that, if need be, he feels this sort of property rights and what they believe, the main issue being, let us have a jury of our peers weigh in on this. They believe that this is a very important issue that could have far-reaching effects, not just for, property owners in the state of Washington, but potentially across the country. So that is a wrap on today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily for this Friday, April the 17th. Check out the centersquare.com Washington's page, and I appreciate you watching. I hope you'll join us again next week. Have a great weekend.